The wine glass shattered against her teeth. Blood and champagne mixed in her mouth as Alexander Frost grabbed her hair and forced her head down toward the marble. "Lick it up!" he screamed at the $40 million wedding. "Lick it up like the dog you are." 200 iPhones went up. Recording. Live streaming. The bride shouted, "World star." The senator's son zoomed in on her face as Frost's shoe pressed against her skull, forcing her down until her lips touched the cold marble mixed with blood from her own mouth. "This is what happens," Frost announced to his guests, his Italian leather Oxford still grinding against her head. "When we let the wrong people serve us, when we pretend the help are human." Nobody stopped him. Nobody helped her. Nobody knew that the 26-year-old girl bleeding on the ballroom floor was Sophie Chen, owner of Chen Marquez Holdings, the $400 billion shadow company that secretly owned the building, the champagne, Frost's company, his homes, his cars, and every single penny in his accounts. Nobody knew that in exactly 72 hours, this video would be playing in federal court while Alexander Frost sobbed so hard, he vomited on the prosecutor's shoes. Nobody knew his own daughter would testify against him. Nobody knew he would end up on this exact same marble floor, begging the woman he called a dog to save him from life in prison. But here's what's going to glue you to this screen. Sophie Chen planned this. She let him do this to her. She knew the cameras were recording, because 4 months earlier, she had discovered something about Alexander Frost so dark, so twisted, that she needed him to destroy himself in public. And the only way to do that was to let him destroy her first. Before I show you the FBI footage of Frost trying to take his own life in custody, before you see why 30 billionaires signed a letter calling Sophie Chen the most dangerous woman in America, I need 30 seconds of brutal honesty from you. If you knew letting someone humiliate you would give you the power to destroy not just them, but their entire bloodline's legacy, would you get on your knees? Would you taste your own blood on marble? Type yes or a no right now, because Sophie Chen's answer will haunt you forever. Sophie Chen wasn't supposed to be working at Lou Bernardin that night. She wasn't supposed to be mopping floors at 3 a.m. or memorizing wine vintages or learning to disappear when rich men walked past. She was supposed to be in her corner office 40 floors above the city, running Chen Marquez Holdings, the $400 billion ghost that owned everything from Asian semiconductor factories to South American lithium mines to the restaurant where she now stood bleeding. Her mother had died 8 months ago. Brain cancer that moved so fast the doctors called it impossible. Elena Chen Marquez had built an empire so quietly that most billionaires didn't even know her name. She was the opposite of men like Frost who held press conferences for every acquisition. Elena bought companies the way other people bought coffee, quietly, efficiently, and before anyone else was awake. While Frost celebrated on magazine covers, Elena controlled his board from shadows. She owned the banks that held his loans, the suppliers who built his towers, even the media companies that printed his publicity. The will reading had been a masterclass in manipulation. Sophie had expected to inherit everything cleanly. She'd been groomed for it since childhood, Harvard Business School at 19, running the Singapore division at 22. Instead, Robert Steinberg, her mother's ancient lawyer, had delivered a final test. Your mother believed power without perspective is tyranny. For 1 year, you will work in your companies. Real work, minimum wage, false names. If anyone discovers who you are, if you quit, if you fail to complete 12 months, the board of trustees takes control permanently. Learn how we treat the people who built this empire. Then you'll be ready to lead it. Sophie had raged. She'd threatened to contest the will. Robert had simply smiled and said, "Your mother knew you would. She also knew you'd ultimately comply. You're too much like her. Curious about everything, even humiliation." He was right. Sophie chose the restaurant first, wanting to understand luxury from the service side. She created an identity. Sophie Martin, recently divorced, needed work, had waited tables in college. For 4 months, she'd lived it completely. A studio apartment in Queens with a broken radiator and neighbors who fought through tissue paper walls. The Q train at 5 a.m., pressed against strangers who smelled like exhaustion and broken dreams. 8-hour shifts that left her feet bleeding in cheap shoes, her hands raw from industrial sanitizer, her hair perpetually scented with kitchen grease despite 3 showers a day. She'd served dinner to her own board members who didn't recognize her. She'd been screamed at by new money wives for imagined slights. She'd been groped by drunk businessmen who assumed the uniform meant availability. She'd watched her manager, Harrison, take credit for her solutions while paying her minimum wage plus insults. She'd seen how the other servers, Maria, who was putting her daughter through medical school, James, who sent half his paycheck to his sick mother in Jamaica, Patricia, who worked 3 jobs to keep her son's asthma medication filled, how they navigated this world of casual cruelty with a grace that humbled her. The wedding night was supposed to be simple. The Frost-Hamilton merger disguised as matrimony. Frost's daughter Ashley marrying Senator Hamilton's son, a cocaine-addled trust fund baby who'd already cheated twice during the engagement. The entire restaurant had been rented for $800,000. Sophie's assignment was the head table, the power center where 9-figure deals were dissolved in wine and sealed with dessert. She'd almost made it through. The dinner service was complete, the speeches finished, the dancing begun. She was clearing the last champagne flutes when Ashley Frost, the bride, drunk on attention and Dom Perignon, flung her arm wide while describing her honeymoon yacht. Her diamond bracelet, 40 carats, Sophie noticed, caught the tray. The glasses cascaded in slow motion, one shattering spectacularly on impact. Sophie dropped immediately, napkin in hand, trying to contain the spreading lake of champagne before it reached anyone's Louboutins. That's when the shard sliced her palm. Deep, immediate scarlet flowing freely. She pressed the napkin against it, reached for the dustpan with her good hand, kept her head down, stayed invisible, just clean it up. Just, the hand that grabbed her bleeding wrist was manicured, strong, and completely without mercy. Alexander Frost yanked her to her feet, his grip tightening until she gasped. The blood squeezed between his fingers, dripping onto his Italian leather shoes. "Look at this mess," he announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "This is what happens when we lower our standards. When we hire incompetents who can't handle a simple tray." Sophie tried to pull away. His grip tightened. She could feel her pulse hammering against his thumb, her blood making his grip slippery. "Sir, please. Are you contradicting me?" He pulled her closer. She could smell his cologne, Tom Ford Oud Wood, $800 a bottle. Could see the capillaries in his eyes from whatever he'd been snorting in the bathroom. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, Mr. Frost, I." "Then tell everyone what you are." He lifted her wrist higher, forcing her onto her toes. The crowd was recording now, phones out, someone live streaming. "Say it." Sophie's mind calculated rapidly. She could destroy him right now. One sentence: "I'm your majority shareholder." But the will, the test, 8 more months of placements, her mother's empire hanging in the balance. The blood was dripping faster now, spattering the marble in perfect circles. "I'm nothing, sir." Louder. "Tell my guests what you are." "I'm nothing." "And what do we do with nothing?" He looked at his security team. "We throw it out. Get this trash out of my sight. And someone clean up this blood before it stains my marble." Security approached. 2 men who avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable but paid too well to protest. They each took an arm, careful not to get blood on their suits. As they marched her past 200 recording phones, past her coworkers who watched in horror, past Harrison who was already on his phone doing damage control, Sophie heard Ashley Frost call out in her wine-slurred voice, "Daddy, you're so mean. She's bleeding everywhere." Then that horrible tinkling laugh. "Derek, did you get it all on video? This is hilarious. Post it with the wedding hashtag." In the alley, Sophie sat on a loading dock, wrapping her hand with paper towels from the bathroom. Her phone, the encrypted one she wasn't supposed to be carrying, had 23 missed calls from Robert Steinberg. She ignored them all. Instead, she made one call. "Marcus, I need a pickup. Service alley behind Lou Bernardine. And bring the medical kit." The black Mercedes appeared in minutes. Marcus, her security chief who'd been shadowing her from a distance for 4 months, took one look at her hand and drove straight to a private urgent care clinic that didn't ask questions about billionaires who looked like bleeding waitresses. 7 stitches. The doctor, paid extensively for discretion, said the scar would be permanent. Sophie studied it under the harsh medical lights, a 3-inch curve across her palm, already knowing she'd never have it surgically revised. Some reminders were worth keeping. "Are you breaking cover?" Marcus asked on the drive to her Queens apartment. "No, but I need you to do something. Pull everything on the Phoenix project, Frost's development in Riverside Gardens. Every permit, every payment, every email. And I want a full financial audit on his nephew, Derek Morrison. The one filming everything tonight. You're going to destroy him. I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves." She looked at her bandaged hand. "He made me bleed in front of 200 people. He's about to bleed in front of the entire world." The next morning, Saturday, Frost woke in his $60 million penthouse feeling like a conqueror. The wedding had been perfect, the merger secured, his daughter married into political royalty, and that moment with the waitress? Pure entertainment. His phone already had 300 messages. The video had gone viral in their social circle. #Frost put her in her place was trending among the Manhattan elite. He watched it again over his morning espresso, savoring the moment she said, "I'm nothing." The blood had been an unfortunate mess, but the cleaning staff had handled it. Harrison had called to personally apologize and confirm the girl was fired and blacklisted from every restaurant in the city. Order restored. What Frost didn't know was that Sophie had spent the night in her real command center, a floor of the Chunmarquez building accessible only by biometric scan. She'd assembled a team of 12 forensic accountants, investigators, lawyers who specialized in corporate warfare. By dawn, they'd uncovered everything. The Phoenix project was more than corrupt, it was criminal. Environmental reports showing benzene contamination buried. Safety inspectors paid to disappear. Tenants threatened by men who technically didn't exist. And the centerpiece. $130 million in fabricated construction costs, funneled through shell companies to Derek Morrison's Cayman accounts. Frost wasn't just displacing families, he was stealing from his own shareholders. From her. But the investigation revealed something else. Something that made Sophie's blood burn hotter than her stitched palm. Patricia Williams, one of her fellow servers at the restaurant, lived in Riverside Gardens with her 8-year-old son. The building marked for demolition first. Patricia, who'd covered Sophie's shifts when she was learning, who'd shared her dinner when Sophie forgot to bring lunch, who'd defended her to Harrison when she'd made mistakes. Patricia was about to be homeless. Sophie called Robert Steinberg at dawn. "The board meeting with Frost. Move it to Monday. That's only 48 hours. 72 from the wedding. I want him to have the whole weekend to celebrate before I end him. And Robert, add Patricia Williams from the Riverside Gardens Tenants Association to the meeting." "Sophie, that's highly irregular. I own 78% of the voting shares. Nothing I do is irregular. It's policy." Sunday, Frost played golf at his country club, accepting congratulations on the wedding, the merger, even the viral video. "Sometimes," he told his foursome, "you have to remind them where they stand, or in her case, where they bleed." The laughter was huge, backslapping, another round of drinks on his tab. That same Sunday, Sophie met Patricia in her Riverside Gardens apartment. Not as Sophie Chin, but as Sophie from the restaurant. Patricia's son, Marcus, was on the couch, nebulizer running, fighting through an asthma attack triggered by the construction dust from preliminary work. "They're going to destroy everything," Patricia said, showing Sophie the eviction notice. 800 families, the bodega where Marcus gets his ice cream, the community center where he plays basketball, his school. "They offered us $15,000 to leave. Do you know what rent costs now? That won't cover 3 months anywhere in the city." Sophie studied the boy's labored breathing, thought about Frost's comment about blood staining his marble, and made a decision that would have made her mother proud. "Patricia, what if I told you there's a way to fight this? The chairwoman of Chunmarquez, the company that owns Frost Development, she's holding a board meeting tomorrow. I heard she's looking for someone from the community to speak. They'd never let me in the building. I have a connection. Someone who works there owes me a favor. Can you be ready? Professional clothes, documents, Everything? Patricia looked at her son, then back at Sophie. I've been ready to fight for 8 months. I just needed someone to unlock the door. Monday morning arrived with a storm that turned Manhattan into a gray watercolor. Frost's convoy of black SUVs hydroplaned through puddles, his mood electric. Today he'd charm this mysterious chairwoman, lock down the Phoenix Project, and break ground by Christmas. He'd already prepared his strategy. Aggressive charm, subtle condescension, and if necessary, the kind of bullying that had built his empire. He arrived at Chunmarquez Tower at 9:45, 15 minutes early. A power move to claim the room. The elevator to the 90th floor was a pneumatic bullet, making his ears pop. He hated that sensation, the physical reminder that he was ascending to someone else's domain. The boardroom was psychological warfare in architectural form. That obsidian table that reflected faces like judgment. Those windows that turned his own tower into a child's toy in the distance. The board members already assembled. 7 faces he didn't recognize and didn't care to. They were bureaucrats, bean counters, the kind of inherited wealth that had never built anything. "Mr. Frost," Robert Steinberg said without standing. "Punctual. Where's your boss?" Frost demanded, claiming the chair directly opposite the empty throne. "I don't have time for games. The chairwoman is en route. She's bringing a guest, Ms. Patricia Williams from the Riverside Gardens Tenants Association." Frost's blood pressure spiked. "Absolutely not. This is a closed session. You cannot ambush me with some welfare queen looking for a handout." "The chairwoman holds 78% of voting shares," Robert replied calmly. "She could bring her hairdresser if she wished." Before Frost could respond, the massive doors opened. 2 women entered. The first was obviously the activist. Tired-looking black woman in a department store suit, clutching a folder like armor, probably coached by some bleeding heart lawyer. The second had to be an assistant, maybe from legal, sent to hold the activist's hand. Frost locked onto Patricia Williams, already formulating his attack. Then something happened that shattered his reality. The entire board stood up. Not for the activist, for the other woman. She moved through the room with liquid grace, every step deliberate, her heels creating a rhythm that seemed to count down to something terrible. She didn't stop at a regular chair. She walked all the way to the head of the table, to the throne. When she turned to face him, when the storm light from the windows illuminated her face, Alexander Frost's mind simply stopped. The same face, the same eyes that had looked up at him while bleeding, the same woman he'd called nothing, whose blood he'd squeezed from her hand, who'd been dragged from his daughter's wedding. But everything else was catastrophically wrong. The polyester was Tom Ford. The exhaustion was authority. The submission was power. "No." The word fell out of him like a death rattle. "No, you're nobody. You're nothing. I had you fired." Sophie Chun sat down with perfect poise, placing her hands on the table. The bandage on her palm was visible, white gauze, medical tape, a reminder of glass and blood and marble. "You had Sophie Martin, the waitress, fired. I'm Sophie Chen, chairwoman of Chunmarquez Holdings. I own 78% of your company." She smiled, that same subtle expression from the alley. "Which means I own 78% of you." Frost's body betrayed him. His hands shook. Sweat erupted across his forehead. His $50,000 suit suddenly felt like a straitjacket. "This is impossible. You served me. You bled on my floor." "I did," Sophie agreed, unconsciously flexing her injured hand. "And you made me tell 200 people I was nothing while my blood dripped through your fingers. You worried it would stain your marble. Tell me, Mr. Frost, how do you think it feels to own the marble you bled on?" She clicked a remote. The wall screen illuminated with a photograph. A small boy with a nebulizer, struggling to breathe. "This is Marcus Williams, Patricia's son, 8 years old. Your preliminary construction has already triggered severe asthma attacks. Your own environmental report, the real one, not the fabrication you submitted, shows the full demolition will release enough particulate matter to potentially kill him." Click. Financial records filled the screen. "But you don't care about one child's life. So let's discuss what you do care about: money. Your submitted construction budget, $340 million. Actual cost, $210 million. The difference, wired to your nephew Derek Morrison's Cayman accounts in 6 transactions over 3 months. Frost shot to his feet. You set me up. You pretended to be nothing. Watching, spying. I was working, Sophie interrupted, her voice sharp as the glass that had cut her. Learning how men like you treat women like me. Discovering that the man I trusted with billions was a thief who makes waitresses bleed for entertainment. You know nothing about work, Frost roared, circling the table like a wounded predator. You inherited everything. Daddy's princess playing dress-up in restaurants. My mother built this empire, Sophie corrected, while men like you took credit for her ideas. And yes, I inherited it. But I chose to clean your dishes for 4 months. I chose to smile while being groped by your friends. I chose to bleed on your marble and say I was nothing because that's what you needed to hear. She stood, matching his energy. You know what I learned serving champagne to billionaires? You're all so afraid. Afraid someone will discover you're not that special. That your empires are built on the backs of people you call nothing. That if we ever stopped serving your champagne, cleaning your offices, building your towers, you'd collapse in a week. She turned to Patricia. Ms. Williams, would you like to address the board? Patricia stood, tears streaming down her face. Not from sadness, but from vindication. She opened her folder, pulled out a photograph of her son. Mr. Frost, you don't remember me, but I've served you 17 times. The Met Gala, 3 charity functions, private dinners. Each time you found something wrong. My shoes, my posture, the way I poured wine. You tried to have me fired twice. I needed that job to pay for my son's medication, so I smiled and apologized for existing in your space. She placed the photo on the obsidian table. This is my son. He wants to be an architect. He draws buildings that reach the clouds just like yours. But unlike yours, his have gardens on every floor. Places for people to breathe. He doesn't know yet that men like you would tear down his home to build another tower he'll never be allowed to enter. Sophie called for the vote. The Phoenix Project, rejected unanimously. The Community Partnership, approved unanimously. Patricia Williams appointed as Director of Community Development, salary matching Frost's former CFO. And finally, Sophie said, eyes locked on Frost, motion to terminate Alexander Frost as CEO, effective immediately, forwarding all evidence to federal prosecutors. The eyes fell like dominoes. You can't. Frost lunged across the table. Security materialized, catching him mid-leap. As they dragged him toward the door, he screamed, "You're nothing. Nothing. I built myself. You're just mommy's money in a suit. You bled for me. You said you were nothing." Sophie walked closer until she could see the terror in his eyes. She held up her bandaged hand, let him see the white gauze spotted with fresh blood from where the stitches had pulled. I bled, yes, but it was my blood, my choice, my lesson. You thought making me bleed gave you power. But power isn't making someone bleed, Mr. Frost. Power is choosing to bleed for something bigger than yourself. I bled to understand. You made others bleed for sport. That's why I own everything and you're about to own nothing. Security pulled him out. His screams echoed down the hall until the elevator swallowed them whole. Sophie returned to her seat, picked up Patricia's proposal, handed her a gold pen worth more than most cars. Your son's medication, Chin Marquez will cover it fully, and his college when he's ready. We're going to need architects who understand that buildings should help people breathe, not suffocate them. That night, Sophie stood in her real apartment for the first time in 4 months. The news was already breaking. Frost Development CEO arrested for embezzlement. The video from the wedding had been recontextualized. The bleeding waitress was the billionaire heiress who owned his company. The internet was exploding. Her phone rang. Robert Steinberg. Your mother would be proud, he said simply. Would she? I destroyed a man for making me bleed. No, you destroyed a man for making thousands bleed while stealing from them. The wedding was just the universe offering you poetic timing. Sophie looked at her bandaged hand. Tomorrow, she'd start her next placement, night janitor at one of her tech companies. Another name, another uniform, another chance to understand her empire from the ground up. Robert? That clause in the will about working these jobs? Was that really my mother's idea? A long pause. Your mother wanted you to learn the business. I wanted you to learn humanity. The clause was mine, added after her death. She would have had you in boardrooms. I wanted you in break rooms. You wanted me to bleed. I wanted you to understand that everyone bleeds the same color. Your mother knew that intellectually. You needed to know it viscerally. After he hung up, Sophie sat in her empty penthouse, city lights painting patterns on the walls. She thought about Patricia's son, struggling to breathe, about her fellow servers, navigating poverty with more grace than billionaires navigated wealth, about blood on marble and the word nothing echoing in a silent room. Alexander Frost had built an empire on the principle that some people matter and others don't. He'd climbed from poverty to penthouses by stepping on anyone who served him. He'd made hundreds bleed, physically, financially, emotionally, and called it business. Sophie had bled once, for 7 stitches worth, and turned it into justice for 800 families. The difference between them wasn't money or power or inherited versus earned wealth. The difference was understanding. Frost saw service as servitude. Sophie learned that service was strength. He believed making someone say, "I'm nothing," gave him power. She discovered that being willing to be nothing, to truly understand nothing, gave her everything. Real power isn't inherited or earned. It's understood. And you can only understand it by bleeding for it with the people who bleed for you. The scar on Sophie's palm would fade but never disappear. She'd carry it through 8 more months of placements, through board meetings and billion-dollar deals. A reminder that she'd bled on marble and lived to own it. That she'd been nothing and everything in the same night. That true power comes not from making others kneel, but from knowing what it feels like to be on your knees. What would you do if you discovered the person you humiliated controlled your entire future? Would you have revealed yourself immediately like Sophie could have, or waited for the perfect moment of destruction? Drop your answer below. I need to know if you believe revenge is better served instantly or ice cold. If the story of blood and billionaires hit you as hard as it hit me, smash that like button until it bleeds. Share this with someone who needs to remember that the people serving us aren't beneath us. They might own us. Subscribe and hit the bell because the next story of billionaire karma will leave you breathless. Remember, every time you make someone bleed, you better pray they're not the one signing your checks. Like and subscribe for more.